Welcome back to part 2 of Toyota drop-down menu, and we're picking up right where we left off. Last time we made a movie clip. That was the drop-down menu that right now when we play the movie it won't do anything, so we have to now control the movie clip and make it appear. And it is a 2-frame movie clip. Again, if I double click on the movie clip, here's the second frame, here's the first frame. It's important to know the frame number because we're going to use the frame number when we communicate with this timeline. So we actually want to have frame 2 appear when we create our action. So that's important to know. So I'm going to go back to scene 1 by clicking over here, and I'm going to create a button, and I'm going to go onto my button layer, and I'm just going to take a rectangle and draw a rectangle first. Now before I do that, I'm going to give it a color. Doesn't matter what color I use. I'll just use a green color right now. And I'm just going to draw a rectangle, and I have it in object drawing mode, so if there was a stroke on it, it would stay together. So I'm just going to draw a button right over top of this Cars and Minivans section. Or I'm drawing a rectangle. It's not a button yet. So there's my rectangle, and it's okay that it's covering up the text right now because we could change that later. But right now it's just a rectangle. It's just a drawing object, as you see in Properties. And what I'm going to do to this drawing object is convert it to a symbol, just like I did with the movie clip. And I can right-click on it and say Convert to Symbol. And this time, the type is going to be a button, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm just going to call it, I'll just call it nav button for now. And I could reuse this nav button for other things, but I'm going to call it nav button, and I'll hit OK. And now you can see that its symbol name is nav button. I don't have to give it an instance name right now because I'm not going to be communicating with the button. I'm only going to be communicating with the movie clip, so I don't need an instance name on my button unless I have to do something specific to the button itself. But right now I don't. What I am going to do is I'm going to put an action on my button. Now this is very important to watch, that when you put an action on a button, you select the button once. You don't double click, because if you double click you'll go inside the button timeline, which you can see it has up, over, down, hit state, which we'll talk about later, which we don't need to put any actions on there. And it wouldn't even let us put actions, it would only put frame actions. So anyway, back to scene 1, just select your button once, and this is the important part. When you go to your actions panel, make sure it says actions button. The most common mistake in Flash in ActionScript 2 is when people put actions, they think they're putting them on a button, and they actually end up appearing on a frame. So what we're going to do is make sure that it says actions button. That will ensure us that we're on that button and we're putting actions on a button. So that's what we're going to do. So the action we're going to put on here is really, it's going to talk to the movie clip and tell it to go to frame 2. That drop down menu movie clip, it's going to tell it to go to frame 2. Except the first thing a button needs is it needs its event handler, or its trigger as we refer to it, and that's under movie control, movie clip control. And there's a term here called on, and that's going to kind of control our mouse event. So I'm going to double click on, and that will start it. And we'll have a little cheater menu here of things that we can choose from. And by default, a lot of times we'll choose on release, because when you click on a button, something happens. But in this case, we're not going to click on the button, we're just going to roll over the button. So we're going to choose rollover. It's going to be our mouse event. So on rollover is going to be our mouse event, and now we have 2 curly brackets, and our action, or what is going to actually occur, the event that's going to occur, is going to be inside those curly brackets. So I'm going to just click in here on the second line, and I'm going to go down to timeline control, because that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be controlling the timeline. So I'm going to say go to and stop, because I just want to go to frame 2 and then stop of that movie clip. So I'm going to put in 2, and then I could use this auto format button to make sure that my code looks correct. So on rollover of that button, we're going to go to and stop frame 2. Okay, now if I tried this right now, if I did control test movie, and I did that, I could see my buttons kind of, I'm seeing my button, and I could see I'm even getting a little link finger, but nothing's happening on rollover. And I know why that is already, because by default, this button action, it's saying go to and stop frame 2, it's looking for this frame 2. It's looking for frame 2 in the timeline that it's in. This button is in scene 1, and it's looking for frame 2, and it can't find it, so it's not doing anything. We want our movie clip to go to frame 2 of its timeline. So to be more specific, to control a movie clip timeline, we have to use its instance name. So in this action, the way we are going to do it is we're just going to precede this action with the instance name. And I believe we called it drop down menu. And I'm going to separate this term here from the action just with a dot. It uses a dot syntax. So it's called drop down, and I spelled it wrong, and that's important that I spell it right because it won't work if I spell it wrong. So drop down menu. It's also good to sometimes keep these instance names very short so that you don't risk having spelling errors. So it's called drop down menu dot go to and stop to. And the first thing, if this didn't work, the first thing I'd check is make sure that I have this matching up with the instance name. So before I even test it, I'm going to close this up, or just click back here, and just go on to my movie clip, and just make sure that it's called drop down menu, and it's the same name. You could even, I guess, copy and paste it if you want to make sure you get it correct. So that sounds right. So I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to do Control Test Movie, and I'm going to roll over this, and our drop down menu comes out. Now what it doesn't do, it doesn't go away, but it does come out. So that's our first part. So that's good. We know how to make our drop down menu come out, except we're still seeing this green button here, and I actually want to make this go away. So I'm going to close this up, close up the SWF, and to make this green button go away, there's a couple ways to do it. One of the ways I'm going to do it right now is just to go over to my properties, and I'm going to go over to color effect, and I'm going to choose alpha, and I'm just going to make it none, or take it down to 0%. My properties are a little off screen here. Move them over. You can see it's at 0%. Move this in a little bit. Okay, now we're seeing this a little bit better. So I'm at 0% for my alpha of that button. It's still going to work, it's just kind of transparent. So let's just try it one more time. Control Test Movie. And there I don't see my button now, but it still works. You can see I still get the link finger, and there it is. Okay, and you can see when I come off it, the link finger goes away. But here's my drop down menu, and we just need to find a way to make that go away. Okay, so what we're going to do to make that go away, one of the things we could think of is trying a roll-off method, but the problem with the roll-off method, if we put a roll-off method on this button, is that if we roll off and even go on to that other menu, it's gonna make everything go back to the way it started. So a roll-off isn't going to allow us to go on to another menu. So that's why we can't use a roll-off, even though that seems like a kind of a simple approach. So we aren't going to do a roll-off. What we're going to do is create a large roll-off button to make this go away. And what I'm going to do is go back into my movie clip and just go to frame 2, and I just want to look at where this ends down here. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to make one big button in the background, but I'm also going to look where this ends, because we've had problems in the past where even though this menu shows on top of the button that we're going to use, sometimes it's still kind of active. So we may make a button that kind of starts here and goes down to the bottom, so then when we roll off of here, it goes away. We could create additional roll-off buttons that kind of go in this little strip along the top and even on the Toyota logo. We won't worry about this is because there would actually be other buttons that would supersede that and make other things happen over here. But over the Toyota logo and up this little top strip and down here, we need kind of a roll-off button to make this drop-down menu go away. So that's what's going to happen on this roll-off area. And what we're going to do down here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to make a large button. And I'm just going to draw it. And I know that other one kind of started right around that top door handle. So maybe I'll just draw it all the way down to the bottom. And then I could scale it after the fact. And I'll scroll up a little bit. There's my roll-off button. And again, it's not a roll-off button yet. It's just a rectangle. I have to right-click on it and convert to symbol. And I'll call it, it's coming up as button type, I'll call it roll-off button. I'll hit OK and make sure it is on the roll-off layer. And what's going to happen on that, and I'll do a little shortcut here. I'm going to go to this button, look at its action, and since we're going to be talking to the drop-down menu, I'm going to use the same action. That way I don't have to retype this code. I'm going to highlight this code. I'm going to right-click and copy it. And then I'm going to go on to this large button and go into its actions. Again, make sure it says Actions button. and I'm going to right click paste, and it's going to say on rollover drop down menu go to and stop to, and the only thing that's going to change here is that instead of go to and stop to make the menu go away, it's actually going to go back to frame 1 because that's where it's blank. So this is the one where it's actually going to go back to its blank state. So we're going to put 1 here. So the rollover cars and minivans goes to frame 2. It displays the drop down menu. This button, the roll off, makes it actually go to frame 1. And keep in mind, it is a rollover button. We're still just going to roll, even though we're calling it a roll off, it is going to be activated by rolling over it. So that's why that is there. So we're going to see if this works. I'm going to leave it green for now until after I test it. So I'm going to test it. There's a drop down, and I can see it could go up a little bit more, and that makes it go away. So I could go up over that door handle a little bit, and I could scale this up using the scale tool. I'm going to move the transformation point down, so that when I scale, it's a little easier to scale up on it, and the bottom stays in place. Alright, so that should be good. Next step I'm going to do, like we did before, is I could go to color effect and turn this down. And one thing I'll try, here's another method. I already showed you that method of turning the alpha down. Another method for making an invisible button is to actually double click and go inside the button timeline, basically add a keyframe for the hit state. I'm going to do F6, and that adds the hit state of a button in Flash is basically its active state. So it's not ever seen. The hit state isn't seen, it's just its active area. So by putting an keyframe over the active area, that means it's going to be active even if I go to my up state and I hit delete. So I deleted my button. It has no up state, no over state, no down state, but it has a hit state. That means it has an active state. So even if I go back to scene 1, when you make a button in that method, it does show up in this translucent blue, just so it allows you to see it. It's almost kind of, it's a little better than using this because at least that way you can see it. So, you know, it's at least easier to select and put actions on it. So I'm going to see if this works. And again, it should not be seen. So I'm going to test movie. And I'm going to go here, and then it should roll off. So that's working. One thing, it never hurts to try different things. I'm going to use my transformation palette, and I'm going to just drag it up, and I'm just going to see if this method is any different than the transparent button as far as whether it's active or not. And you'll see what I mean when I test it. I'm just going to test it, and I'm going to go here, and you can see what's happening. It's going away. It's making that menu go away too soon. So even though there's a menu over top, somehow that button is affecting it. Other buttons will keep that from happening, but the fact that it's just a movie clip appearing, it doesn't make that go away. So I'm going to move this back down again. And if I needed other areas, I could just copy this button. And I'm going to do an option drag and copy it. And then I'm going to take my transformation point and move it to the corner. It just makes it easy to scale these things. And I'm going to put this button over here. I'll put it up in the corner and just stretch it out a little bit. And that's about it. I could take another one if I want and put it right next to it and just squeeze it down and stretch it out. Now I have invisible buttons kind of surrounding all my other buttons as far as I need so far. So when I come off my menu and I go onto any of these, it's going to make the menu go away. So I'm just going to test that out. There's my menu. There it comes off. I'll test it over here. I'll test it over here. And these I'm not going to worry about right now. So that's working. So I'm going to stop here.